I felt like a ghost, haunting the halls of a place that no longer felt like home. The thought of Silas selling our beloved house to strangers was almost unbearable. I was devastated and felt completely powerless against his greed. My name is Beatrice Hawthorne, and until a few weeks ago, my life was as warm and comforting as a cup of cocoa on a snowy day. Arthur, my husband, was the kindest man you could ever meet. We lived in Hawthorne House, a big, old house that had been in his family for generations. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love and laughter. Arthur and I spent our days tending to our garden, reading books by the fire, and taking walks in the woods behind our home. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was all that mattered. Arthur was a veteran, a hero from World War II, but he never bragged about it. He was just a good man, through and through. We'd been married for almost 30 years, a lifetime of shared memories. He made me laugh every single day, and his hugs could chase away any worry. Hawthorne House was our sanctuary, filled with antique furniture, family portraits, and the comforting scent of beeswax polish. It was more than just a house, it was a home, a place where we built our life together, a place where I thought we'd grow old together. But life, as I was about to learn, can change in an instant. That instant came the day Arthur closed his eyes for the last time. It was peaceful, he was at home, and I held his hand, but the pain of his absence was a heavy weight in my heart. We had no children, so Arthur's closest relative was his nephew, Silas. I never particularly liked Silas, he always seemed a little too slick, a little too interested in Arthur's money. The reading of the will was a somber affair. Mr. Abernathy, our family lawyer, cleared his throat and began to read. I expected to inherit Hawthorne House, of course, and a comfortable sum to live on. Arthur had always assured me I would be taken care of. But as Mr. Abernathy continued, my heart began to sink. The will, dated just a few weeks before Arthur's death, was different. Silas was named the primary beneficiary, inheriting almost everything: Hawthorne House, the family business, all of Arthur's savings. I was left with a small amount, barely enough to cover my expenses for a year. It was as if Arthur, the man I knew and loved, had been replaced by someone else when he made this will. I was numb with disbelief. How could Arthur do this to me? The days that followed were a blur of grief and confusion. Silas, ever the opportunist, was already making plans for Hawthorne House. He talked about renovations, about modernizing the place, about selling it for a hefty profit. He treated me with a thinly veiled disdain, as if I were an unwelcome guest in what was now his home. I felt utterly alone. My friends offered condolences, but they couldn't understand the depth of my despair. I had lost Arthur, my home, and my financial security all at once. I was facing a future I never imagined, a future filled with uncertainty and fear. I started packing, sorting through our belongings, deciding what to keep and what to discard. It was a heartbreaking process, each item a reminder of happier times. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay in Hawthorne House under Silas's roof. I felt like a ghost, haunting the halls of a place that no longer felt like home. The thought of Silas selling our beloved house to strangers was almost unbearable. I was devastated and felt completely powerless against his greed. With only a week left before Silas planned to put Hawthorne House on the market, I felt a desperate need to be close to Arthur one last time. I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, a place we rarely visited but which held a treasure trove of family history. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through the grimy windows, illuminating forgotten relics of generations past. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, mothballs, and memories. Old trunks overflowed with yellowed letters, faded photographs, and antique clothing. I wandered through the dusty space, touching familiar objects, each one whispering a story of a life lived within these walls. I ran my hand over Arthur's old rocking horse, remembering the stories he told me about his childhood. I picked up a tarnished silver locket, a gift from his mother. Each item brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a sense of connection to the past, to Arthur, to the enduring spirit of Hawthorne House. It was in this moment of quiet reflection, surrounded by the ghosts of my past, that I was about to find something that would change everything. Something that would give me the strength to fight back. My eyes fell on a trunk tucked away in a corner, one I hadn't opened in years. It contained Arthur's World War II uniform, neatly folded and preserved. I remembered how proud he was to have served his country, even though he rarely spoke about the war. With trembling hands, I lifted the heavy lid. The musty smell of old fabric filled the air. I carefully unfolded the jacket, running my fingers over the faded patches and medals. It was like touching Arthur himself. As I smoothed out the lining, my fingers brushed against something stiff and papery tucked inside an inner pocket. Curiosity piqued, I pulled it out. It was a letter, folded and sealed with wax. The handwriting was unmistakably Arthur's, but the envelope was addressed to me. Why would Arthur write me a letter and hide it in his uniform? My heart pounded in my chest. This felt important, like a secret waiting to be revealed. With bated breath, I carefully broke the seal and began to read. This letter held the key to everything. The words swam before my eyes as I unfolded the delicate paper. Arthur's familiar script filled the page, but the tone was filled with a sadness I had never heard in his voice. My dearest Beatrice, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I pray this letter finds you well, though I fear the contents may cause you pain. He went on to explain that in the weeks leading up to his death, Silas had become increasingly insistent that he revise his will. Silas claimed it was just a formality, a way to simplify things, but Arthur confessed that he felt pressured and manipulated, especially during his moments of weakness. Silas had preyed on his fears and anxieties, subtly suggesting that I wouldn't be able to manage the estate on my own. Arthur wrote that he ultimately succumbed to Silas's pressure, signing a new will that he deeply regretted. He explained that he couldn't bring himself to tell me, ashamed of his weakness and fearing my reaction. He ended the letter with words of love and a plea for forgiveness. Please know that I loved you more than anything in the world, and I never intended to hurt you. I hope that someday, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. My hands trembled as I finished reading. It was true. Silas had manipulated Arthur. But the letter wasn't over. In a postscript, Arthur added, I know this isn't much comfort, but I've taken steps to protect you. Inside this pocket, you'll find a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. In that box, you will find proof of Silas's dishonesty and the original, unrevised version of my will. Please, Beatrice, use this to fight for what is rightfully yours. Don't let Silas get away with this. I frantically searched the pocket again, my fingers trembling with anticipation. And there it was, a small, tarnished key attached to a faded tag that read, First National Bank, Box 72. Relief washed over me in a tidal wave. Arthur hadn't abandoned me after all. He had foreseen Silas's treachery and had secretly provided me with the means to expose him. A surge of anger coursed through me, replacing my despair. Silas would not get away with this. He would not steal my home and Arthur's legacy. I had a fighting chance, and I was determined to use it. I carefully tucked the letter and the key into my purse, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. The game had changed. Now, it was my turn. Silas wouldn't know what hit him. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt since Arthur's passing. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my heart, but it was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. I dressed in my best outfit, a sensible skirt suit that made me feel confident and capable. First National Bank was a familiar place, Arthur and I had banked there for years. As I approached the safety deposit box section, my palms began to sweat. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The bank clerk, a young woman with a friendly smile, led me to a small, private room. She retrieved the safety deposit box and placed it on the table in front of me. My hands trembled as I inserted the key, turned it, and opened the box. Inside, nestled amongst some old documents, were two items, a thick manila envelope and a smaller, more official-looking document. My heart pounded as I reached for the envelope. This was the moment I would learn the full extent of Silas's deceit. This was the moment I would reclaim my life. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and opened the envelope. Inside the envelope were copies of bank statements, receipts, and other financial documents. As I scanned them, a disturbing pattern emerged. Over the past few years, Silas had been systematically transferring funds from the family business into his personal account. He had been siphoning off money, little by little, using his position of trust to line his own pockets. The evidence was irrefutable, a clear indication of Silas's embezzlement. My blood boiled with righteous anger. He wasn't just greedy, he was a thief, a liar, and a manipulator. He had not only cheated me out of my inheritance but had also betrayed Arthur's trust and jeopardized the future of the family business. With trembling hands, I reached for the other document in the box. It was, as Arthur had promised, the original version of his will, signed and dated years before his illness. In this will, Hawthorne House and the bulk of his estate were left to me, his beloved wife. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a fierce determination to make Silas pay for his crimes. I had everything I needed to expose him and reclaim my rightful inheritance. This was going to be a fight, but I was ready. Leaving the bank, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Arthur's memory, for the integrity of our family, and for justice itself. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was no longer the grieving, powerless widow Silas had underestimated. My first stop was Mr. Abernathy's office, our family lawyer. I marched in with the safety deposit box contents securely tucked under my arm. Mr. Abernathy looked surprised to see me, especially after the reading of the will. "Beatrice, what can I do for you?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. I placed the documents on his desk, the original will on top. "I believe there has been a grave mistake, Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice firm and steady. "This is the original will of my late husband, Arthur Hawthorne. And this," I gestured to the bank statements, "is evidence of Silas Hawthorne's embezzlement from the family business." Mr. Abernathy's eyes widened as he began to examine the documents. I watched him closely, my heart pounding with anticipation. This was the moment everything would change. This was the moment Silas's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. Mr. Abernathy spent what felt like an eternity reviewing the documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. He carefully compared the signatures on both wills, scrutinized the dates, and examined the bank statements with a practiced eye. Finally, he looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Beatrice," he said, his voice now serious, "this is quite a discovery. If this is indeed Arthur's original will, and these documents are authentic, then the revised will is invalid, and Silas's actions are criminal." He paused, then added, "I must admit, I was surprised by the contents of the revised will. It seemed out of character for Arthur. But without this evidence, there was nothing I could do." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "This changes everything. I will need to conduct a thorough investigation, of course, but based on what I'm seeing here, you have a very strong case." A wave of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had found the proof I needed, and I had a lawyer who was willing to fight for me. A small smile crept onto my face. Silas's reign of greed was about to come to an end. It was a long road ahead, but I was ready to walk it. Over the next few days, Mr. Abernathy and his team worked tirelessly to gather more evidence and prepare the legal paperwork. I tried to stay busy, focusing on packing and making arrangements for my future, even though I desperately hoped I wouldn't have to leave Hawthorne House after all. Silas, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued to make plans for the house, even scheduling an open house for potential buyers. He seemed so confident, so smug, that it made my blood boil. I knew I had to act quickly before he finalized the sale. One evening, while Silas was out, I received a call from Mr. Abernathy. "Beatrice," he said, his voice urgent, "we have everything we need. We're ready to file the lawsuit and obtain a temporary restraining order to prevent the sale of Hawthorne House. Can you meet me at the courthouse tomorrow morning?" A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. The moment of truth was at hand. "Yes, Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice trembling with anticipation. "I'll be there." That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, replaying the events of the past few weeks in my mind. I thought of Arthur, of our happy life together, and of the injustice he had suffered at the hands of his own nephew. I knew I had to do this, not just for myself, but for him. The following morning, I arrived at the courthouse, my heart pounding in my chest. Mr. Abernathy greeted me with a reassuring smile and led me to a quiet room where we could review the documents one last time. As we waited for the judge to arrive, Mr. Abernathy explained the process. "We'll present the evidence, the original will, Arthur's letter, and the bank statements. We'll argue that the revised will was obtained through undue influence and that Silas has been embezzling funds from the family business. We'll request a temporary restraining order to prevent the sale of Hawthorne House until the matter can be resolved in court." I nodded, my throat tight with nerves. I knew this was my only chance to stop Silas and reclaim what was rightfully mine. When the judge finally entered the room, I took a deep breath and prepared to tell my story. Mr. Abernathy presented the evidence with skill and conviction. He laid out the facts clearly and persuasively, painting a damning picture of Silas's greed and treachery. I watched the judge's face, searching for any sign of how he was reacting to the evidence. It was impossible to tell. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and told the judge about Arthur, about our life together, and about the devastation I felt when I learned about the revised will. I spoke from the heart, my voice filled with emotion. I wanted the judge to understand the injustice that had been done, not just to me, but to Arthur's memory. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge rendered his decision. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, his voice grave, "I am granting a temporary restraining order to prevent the sale of Hawthorne House. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding the revised will and the allegations of embezzlement against Silas Hawthorne." A gasp of relief escaped my lips. We had won, at least for now. I looked at Mr. Abernathy, and he gave me a knowing nod. The battle was far from over, but we had taken the first crucial step. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I knew that Silas would fight back, but I was no longer afraid. I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to see justice served. Meanwhile, Silas, completely unaware of the legal bombshell that had just been dropped, was busy preparing for the open house at Hawthorne House. He had hired a real estate agent, arranged for refreshments, and even hired a cleaning crew to make the house sparkle. He was confident that he would receive multiple offers and be able to sell the house for a substantial profit. He was in for a rude awakening. He had no idea what was coming. The eviction notice was on its way. The day of the open house dawned bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the dark cloud that was about to descend upon Silas's plans. Potential buyers began arriving, drawn in by the promise of a charming, historic home in a desirable location. Silas, beaming with pride, greeted each guest with a practiced smile and a carefully rehearsed sales pitch. As the open house reached its peak, with prospective buyers milling about, admiring the house's features and discussing potential offers, I arrived at Hawthorne House, accompanied by Mr. Abernathy and a uniformed sheriff's deputy. Silas's smile faltered as he saw us approaching. His eyes narrowed, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. Beatrice, he said, his voice strained, what are you doing here? This is a private event. I ignored his question and handed him the eviction notice, my hand trembling slightly but my gaze unwavering. This is an eviction notice, Silas, I said, my voice clear and strong. You are no longer the owner of Hawthorne House. You are trespassing on my property. The color drained from Silas's face as he read the document. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the shocked faces of the potential buyers. His carefully constructed facade began to crumble before my eyes. He was about to lose everything. This is ridiculous. Silas sputtered, his voice rising in anger. This is my house. I inherited it from my uncle Arthur. This eviction notice is a fake. He turned to the potential buyers, his face flushed with indignation. Don't listen to her. She's trying to sabotage the sale. This is all a misunderstanding. But the potential buyers were already backing away, their faces a mixture of confusion and suspicion. The real estate agent, sensing a disaster, quickly ushered them out of the house, offering hurried apologies. I think it's time for you to leave, Silas, I said, my voice calm but firm. The sheriff's deputy is here to ensure that you do so peacefully. Silas glared at me, his eyes filled with hatred. You haven't heard the last of this, Beatrice, he snarled. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to take you for everything you've got. I'm not afraid of you, Silas, I said, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. I have the truth on my side, and I'm not going to back down. With a final, venomous look, Silas stormed out of Hawthorne House, leaving behind a scene of chaos and disbelief. As the sheriff's deputy escorted him off the property, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had finally stood up to him, and I had won. But I knew that the battle was far from over. News of Silas's eviction and the allegations of embezzlement spread quickly through the town. People were shocked and appalled by his behavior, especially given Arthur's reputation as an honest and respected member of the community. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the legal battle, detailing the evidence against Silas and highlighting Beatrice's courage in standing up to him. Public opinion quickly turned against Silas, and he became a pariah in the town. Meanwhile, Mr. Abernathy and the authorities continued their investigation into Silas's finances. They uncovered a web of deceit and fraudulent transactions, confirming that he had indeed been siphoning off money from the family business for years. As the evidence mounted against him, Silas's situation became increasingly desperate. He hired a high-powered lawyer to defend him, but even the best legal representation couldn't erase the mountain of evidence that pointed to his guilt. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visit from Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the case. He informed me that Silas had been formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and undue influence. He also told me that Silas was facing the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. It seemed justice was finally on its way. The trial was a tense and emotional affair. Mr. Abernathy presented the evidence with meticulous detail, painting a clear picture of Silas's greed and deception. Witnesses testified about Silas's behavior, confirming his manipulative tactics and his obsession with money. Silas, on the other hand, maintained his innocence, claiming that he had been acting in Arthur's best interests and that the embezzlement allegations were fabricated. He tried to discredit Beatrice, portraying her as a bitter and vindictive widow seeking to destroy his reputation. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The jury listened intently to the testimony, carefully weighing the facts and considering the evidence. After several days of deliberation, they reached a verdict. I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest, as the jury forewoman read out the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Silas Hawthorne, guilty on all counts. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense that I almost fainted. Justice had finally been served. Silas was led away in handcuffs, his face pale and defeated. He would pay for his crimes. Arthur's memory was vindicated. With Silas behind bars, the legal process moved swiftly to finalize the estate. The court officially recognized Arthur's original will, confirming that I was the rightful heir to Hawthorne House and the bulk of his estate. The revised will, tainted by Silas's undue influence, was deemed invalid. I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that Arthur's wishes had been honored and that his legacy would be protected. The family business, which Silas had nearly ruined with his embezzlement, was placed under new management. Honest and trustworthy individuals were brought in to restore its reputation and ensure its long-term success. As for the money that Silas had stolen, the authorities were able to recover a significant portion of it. Although some of it was lost forever, I was grateful that at least some of it could be used to compensate those who had been harmed by his actions. Finally, after months of turmoil and uncertainty, I was able to return to Hawthorne House, not as a temporary guest, but as its rightful owner. It felt like coming home, like stepping back into the warm embrace of Arthur's love. But it was bittersweet, as he was no longer there to share it with me. As the months passed, I slowly began to heal from the pain and betrayal I had experienced. I spent my days tending to the garden that Arthur and I had loved so much, reading books by the fire, and taking walks in the woods behind Hawthorne House. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, finding comfort and support in their companionship. I realized that even though Arthur was gone, I wasn't alone. I had a community that cared about me, and I had the strength to build a new life for myself. One day, while sorting through Arthur's belongings, I came across his old war medals. I remembered how proud he was to have served his country, and I decided to find a way to honor his memory. I contacted the local veterans organization and offered to donate a portion of my inheritance to support their programs. They were overjoyed by my offer and invited me to attend a ceremony where they would formally recognize my contribution. At the ceremony, I spoke about Arthur, about his courage and his kindness, and about his unwavering commitment to serving others. I knew that he would have been proud of me for using my inheritance to help those in need. But the donation to the veterans wasn't enough. I wanted to do something more, something that would have a lasting impact on the community and truly honor Arthur's legacy. After much thought, I decided to establish a foundation in Arthur's name. The Arthur Hawthorne Foundation would provide support to veterans and their families, offering scholarships, job training, and mental health services. I worked closely with Mr. Abernathy and other community leaders to set up the foundation, ensuring that it would be well managed and effective. I poured my heart and soul into the project, determined to make it a success. The Arthur Hawthorne Foundation quickly became a vital resource for veterans in the area. It helped countless individuals and families, providing them with the support they needed to overcome challenges and build brighter futures. Seeing the positive impact of the foundation filled me with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. I knew that Arthur would have been incredibly proud of what we had accomplished. It was a fitting tribute to his life and his values. And although I still missed him every day, I found comfort in knowing that his spirit lived on through the work of the foundation. I knew this was what I was meant to do. Years passed. Hawthorne House became a haven, not just for me, but for the veterans supported by the foundation. We held events in the garden, workshops in the library, and provided a safe and welcoming space for those who had served our country. I often found myself in the attic, the place where I had discovered Arthur's letter and the key that changed everything. It was no longer a place of dust and forgotten memories, but a place of hope and new beginnings. I would sit among the old trunks and photographs, feeling Arthur's presence beside me. One afternoon, a young veteran named Michael came to visit. He had been struggling with PTSD and had found solace in the Foundation's programs. He told me how much the Foundation had helped him, how it had given him a new sense of purpose and hope. As he spoke, I noticed him looking at Arthur's old war medals displayed on the wall. He asked me about Arthur's service, and I shared stories of his courage and his kindness. "Your husband was a hero," Michael said, his voice filled with admiration. And you, Mrs. Hawthorne, are a hero too." His words touched my heart. I knew that Arthur would have been proud of me, not for reclaiming my inheritance, but for using it to make a difference in the lives of others. And so, my life took an unexpected turn, a journey filled with grief, betrayal, and ultimately, triumph. What began as a desperate search for justice in a dusty attic became a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of fighting for what is right, and the ability to find purpose even in the face of loss. Silas, consumed by greed, sought to erase Arthur's legacy and steal what was rightfully mine. But in the end, he only succeeded in strengthening my resolve and inspiring me to create something beautiful and meaningful in Arthur's name. Hawthorne House, once threatened by his avarice, became a beacon of hope for countless veterans and their families. It became a place where Arthur's spirit lived on, not just in the memories of those who knew and loved him, but in the tangible good that the foundation was doing in the world. I learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found. And that even when we feel most alone, we are never truly alone. Arthur's love continued to guide me, and his memory gave me the strength to persevere. He may have been gone, but his legacy lived on, stronger than ever. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. I often wonder what Arthur would think of all that has happened. I imagine him smiling down on me, his eyes twinkling with pride. I can almost hear his gentle voice whispering, "Well done, my dear Beatrice. You are stronger than you know." And sometimes, when I'm sitting in the garden, surrounded by the flowers we planted together, I feel his presence so strongly that I can almost reach out and touch him. I know that he is always with me, in my heart and in my memories. I've learned that life is full of unexpected twists and turns, of joys and sorrows, of triumphs and defeats. But through it all, the most important thing is to never give up hope, to never lose faith in the power of love, and to always fight for what is right. And so, I continue to live my life at Hawthorne House, surrounded by friends, supported by my community, and guided by the memory of my beloved Arthur. I have found peace and purpose in my new life, and I am grateful for every moment. It is a good life, a meaningful life, a life that Arthur would be proud of. And that is all that matters. I am happy. I am home. Looking back, I realize that my journey was not just about reclaiming an inheritance or punishing a wrongdoer. It was about something much bigger than that. It was about the importance of truth, the necessity of justice, and the enduring power of love. Without truth, there can be no trust, no honesty, no genuine connection between people. Silas's lies and deceit poisoned our family and threatened to destroy everything that Arthur and I had built together. Without justice, there can be no fairness, no equality, no sense of security or peace. Silas's greed and manipulation violated Arthur's wishes and threatened to leave me destitute and alone. But even more important than truth and justice is love. Arthur's love for me gave me the strength to persevere. The love of my friends and community supported me during my darkest hours. And my love for Arthur inspired me to create something beautiful and meaningful in his name. Love is the foundation of all that is good in the world. It is the force that binds us together, that gives us hope, and that inspires us to make a difference. And it is the one thing that Silas could never steal from me. Love is what helped me understand that things can get better, and that it is always important to have heart. It is what made this journey worthwhile. The sun streams through the attic window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I run my hand over the worn fabric of Arthur's old uniform, remembering the day I found the letter and the key. It seems like a lifetime ago, yet the memories are as vivid as if they happened yesterday. I close my eyes and imagine Arthur standing beside me, his arm around my shoulder, his smile warm and reassuring. I can almost feel his presence, his love, his unwavering support. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the trees outside, carrying with it the scent of flowers and the promise of new beginnings. I open my eyes and take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the fresh, clean air. A smile spreads across my face, a genuine smile that reaches all the way to my heart. I know that Arthur would be proud of me, not just for what I have accomplished, but for who I have become. I am strong, I am resilient, and I am determined to live my life to the fullest, honoring his memory every step of the way. And as I look out at the garden, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, I know that everything is going to be all right. I am at peace. I am home. And I am ready for whatever the future may hold. Beatrice's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we can find strength we never knew we had. The love we carry for others can guide us through injustice, and standing up for what's right often becomes our greatest tribute to those we've lost. When have you discovered unexpected strength in yourself, and how did it change the way you faced a difficult situation?